In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a simple depth of field effect like you see here. Notice that the ball in the foreground is out of focus, as is the ball in the background, while this ball in the center here is more or less in sharp focus. To begin, create a new scene. Next, add a floor object to your scene, and add a sphere. Next, move that sphere up onto the floor, give it a Y position of 100, and make a few copies of it. I'm going to go ahead and make 3 copies, or excuse me, 2 copies for a total of 3 spheres. I'm going to move one sphere back and in the middle, and another sphere further back and to the right, as you see here in my top view. So now in my 4-way view, I've got 3 spheres. I'm now going to select the center sphere and rotate my view so that I can see all 3 spheres. Make it something like this. And I'm now going to move that back sphere so it looks a little bit better in my frame, like so. So I now have 3 spheres sitting on the floor. Next up, I'm just going to apply some simple lighting to my scene using HDRI. So click on your content browser icon and click on this icon here that looks like a pill bottle. That'll take you to your presets home. Inside of there should be a Cinema 4D folder. Inside of that, materials, and inside of there, HDRI. Now this might be a little bit different depending on your Cinema 4D version, but basically we're just trying to find a nice panoramic image we can put on a sky. Pick any of these HDRI images that you like. I'm going to go with, let's see, this outdoor scene right here, HDRI 12. I'm going to drag that to my material browser, and I'm going to add a sky object to my scene. So I'm going to press and hold on this light, choose sky, and drag my HDRI image onto the sky. Now if I render, I've got my sky in my background, and I have these objects, but everything seems a little bit dark. And that's because my lighting is being done with the default light or the auto light. So I'm going to turn that off. To do that, click on your render settings button, go into your options tab, and turn off default light. So now if I was to render, or if you were to render, it would be completely black except for the sky. We now need to tell Cinema 4D to use this sky as a light. So go to Effect, Global Illumination. Now this tutorial is going to be perhaps obsolete for those of you working in R13 with the physical render, but for those of you working in R12 or below, this will still be pretty useful. I'm just going to use IR still image and keep it like so and give it a render. Notice now that the image is lighting our scene, adding shadows, doing all of that. If you plan on animating this, you might choose the sky sampler, so that all of our lighting is coming from the sky. Now, it is a little bit grainy, so I'm going to go back to IR still image. So, for now, IR still image should be great. Next up, let's create some simple materials for these spheres. I'm just going to create a new material, and I'm going to name this gradient. Open up that material, and go to your color channel. Notice that I'm on reflection right now, so click on color. Click on this delta or triangle right there and choose gradient from the pull down. What that's going to allow you to do is edit the colors. So click on your gradient, and it's currently set to 2DU for me, which gives me a nice horizontal gradient. And if I were to tighten up these 2 knots on my gradient, I would get a black and white striped ball. So let's just apply this material to our objects. I'm going to drag it on one at a time to my different spheres and render. But I can't really see it. It's based on the rotation of these spheres. So let's go with 2DV for vertical in our gradient. Give it another render, and at least now we can see the gradient. And go ahead and pick a couple colors that are a little more exciting to you. You might do, since I've got a woodsy background, I'm going to try sort of a woodsy color scheme. Sort of a algae green and maybe something like a peaty brown. And render again. Got these. I can rotate them now just to add a little bit of variation, make them look a little bit more organic. And I can also add in a little bit of reflection. So turn on reflection and click on the triangle in your texture tab there and add Fresnel. What that does is it makes the your object more reflective around the edges and less so in the center. So when I re-render, I get this. To be perfectly honest, these colors are atrocious, so feel free to pick some others. Maybe something more fun. When in doubt, just go with the complementary color scheme. You can never go too far wrong with one of those. The next thing I'm realizing is that my image is a little bit dark. So I'm going to activate something called color mapping in my render settings. So click on your render settings icon and choose Effect, Color Mapping. What that does is it automatically adjusts the brightness of your image in a way similar to auto levels in Photoshop. So this is pretty good. Again, not perfect, but better than nothing. And let's give it another render. Great. Okay. Now onto the whole point of this demonstration, which is to turn on some depth of field. Go ahead and add a camera to your scene. The camera will be placed in the same location as your current editor camera, and click on the icon next to it to make it active. Next, go into your four-way view. You should have something like this, and then go into your top view. What I want you to do is click on your camera object and then its depth tab. And we're going to activate the settings we need to use depth of field. Right now we have a target distance. Think of the target distance as the point at which everything should be in focus. So I'm going to put that right in the front third of my middle ball. Next, I'm going to activate rear blur. And basically everything behind this new plane that showed up, this rear blur plane, is going to be completely blurry. And everything in between this middle plane and this plane will be some degree of blurry. I'm also going to add some front blur, and I'm going to use that to blur out my frontmost sphere. So I've got all my objects encompassed. Each sphere has got a plane attached to it more or less. And now when I render, again, nothing has really changed just yet. We've just set up our settings. So we have to turn on depth of field as an effect in our render settings. Go into your render settings, go to Effect, and turn on depth of field. Give it one more render. And notice that after it finishes rendering your image, it goes back and does another pass where it blurs based on these planes that you've set. If you want to adjust the strength of your blur, you can use this blur strength setting. You can get some pretty ridiculous values, like 50%. Is going to make this look like we shot it with a macro lens. With really intense depth of field. So I'm just going to lower that back down to 5 or 10%, and it gives you a much better look. There's a little bit of jaggy action going on here. That's because we don't have best anti-aliasing turned on. So go to anti-aliasing and change your mode from geometry to best. That is a quick and dirty overview of how to use the depth of field settings in Cinema 4D. That should at least get you started. Best of luck.